I watched a movie a few days ago. I Am Mother. This film, which is a film about knowledge, begins with the disappearance of all people in the world. Before the extinction of all human beings, 63,000 human embryos were stored on the ground. Then the robot takes one of those embryos and grows it. Okay, what I will say next is not so much about the film, but the opening of the film was very interesting to me. One of the first questions that comes to my mind is how do a group of children grow up if they are isolated from the rest of the world from the moment they are born? What language do they speak? How do they communicate with each other? But, of course, this did not occur to me for the first time. Throughout history, many people before me have thought about it, even practiced it. This was originally called language poverty experiment. And of course, this step was one of the most unethical steps that humanity would take. The main goal was to understand person, to know what is deeper. But later, cultural historians such as Roger Shattuck have suggested renaming such experiments, and they called these experiments forbidden experiments. The first forbidden practice in written sources is found in the writings of Herodot. The famous Egyptian ruler gave Psamtik one from a family to the family of a shepherd who took his newborn babies. But the shepherd's family never spoke to those babies, and these children began to develop a language among themselves. And the first word they said was Bacchus. The word Bacchus did not exist in the Egyptian language, but in the language of the Phrygians who lived here. The word meant bread, and since then the Egyptians have believed that their roots go back to the Phrygians. The second experiment was conducted by Frederick II, who lived in the 13th century. Children born at this time were not spoken in any other language, and it was the first investigated which language they could speak. They estimated that the children who would speak either Arabic, Hebrew, Greek, or Latin. If you look, you will see that these languages are either the language in which the holy books were written or the language to which the first writing belonged. Because Friedrich's main goal here was to find out what language Adam and Eve spoke. Also, historians later did not mention the language these children spoke. They did mention the atrocities that took place during the experiments. Also, no such experiments were carried out in the following centuries. And some children were found who grew up in the wilderness, and did not develop their language because they never spoke. One of these children is Oksana from Ukraine, because she lives with dogs. She can communicate in the language in which they communicate, but only dogs. But Lyra, bears, sheep, cows, goats, and even children raised by ostriches were found. As these children grew up around animals, they concentrated on their characteristics. Also, these children were rarely raised, most of them did not develop speech at all. What we are talking about is the isolation of babies from the environment for practice. What about those who are isolated from birth? How do they communicate? Who are they? Of course, those with hearing and speech impairments. Over the years, these people have been purposefully isolated from society. But in recent years, thanks to sign language, these people have also been treated. So this sign language must be taught to babies from infancy. If I am taught how will they relate to each other? For example, in the last century, 100 children were brought from different places and brought under the same roof to learning sign language, but they could not learn sign language because they are no longer children. But later it was observed that these children began to communicate with each other. Specialists work constantly to determine this connection. Experts have noticed that the language of communication created by children is even more complex and rich. This proves that I didn't need a voice to connect, but it is still not clear to use how so many languages came into being. But one thing is for sure, the most important step in sharing our information is communication. At the beginning of the video, I told you about the movie.
A big, big family, all together. Would that make you happy?
I am mother. In this child does not need to discover any language because the robot treats the child like a model, and it is clear to use that perhaps the most widely developed language is thinking, because when a person thinks, he speaks to himself. Maybe we have developed our language in this way.